I get the window seat. You don't need it. You're blind. Got me there, you little prick. Welcome to You Guys Podcast. I'm Rob, that's Liam, and this week we watched Blind Fury. But I argue, as Nick really didn't seem that angry, maybe we call it blind indignation. Rutger Hauer plays Nick Parker, a veteran of the Vietnam War who was abandoned and left for dead by his best friend. Trained in the deadly art of being a samurai by a Vietnamese master. Yeah, I know. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. Nick goes out of his way to find his friend 20 years later and forgive him. Caught in a cross-country chase, Nick has to protect his friend's son after his ex-wife was murdered in front of Nick's eyes. You see what I did there? The friend Frank has been forced to create the most nondescript narcotic in cinema history, simply called drugs. This film is one of many in the 80s trend of white samurai, and although a failure at the box office and possible sequels never emerging, this is still a fun time had by all, and Rutger Hauer delivering on a performance that on paper seems out of place for him. Oh, and spoilers for making a change section, Liam. Billy needed to be kidnapped and kept in a room right up until the end, and then when rescued, he just says, "Thank you," and nothing else. No more speaking for this kid. He was more annoying than the Phantom Menace kid.
Yeah, this is one of those interesting ones because there's always the concern going into these podcasts that like Rob's going to have like some hot take or we're going to really like disagree on everything. I agree with every single thing you said in that introduction. Starting with Billy, he's got to go. Right, just be clear. This was the first time I've ever seen this movie. Interestingly, last week, I was like, when you described it at the end of the podcast, I was like, oh, that sounds like Zatoichi. It's because it is Zatoichi. It's a reimagining rather than a remake of, I think it's the 26th movie. No, sorry, it's the 17th movie in 26 mainline movies between 1962 and 1989, all starring Shintaro Katsu. There was like a TV show from 74 to 79. You know, it's a huge thing in Japan.
It's very interesting because I've never heard of Zatoichi. Well, I didn't even know this was,
It's weird because for me, I knew it because of the Takeshi Kitano like reboot of sorts. That was like a perennial FOP favorite in the early noughties. It was released in 2003. And it was one of those ones, if you went into FOP, it was always there in like the world cinema section. And I think low-key it might be an absolute masterpiece. And that was one of my issues with this film. I kept comparing it with the film, the 2003 film that was starring, written and directed by B. Takashi, which is absolutely fantastic. A movie that knows what its tone is. It has little bits of comedy. The use of audio in that film is spectacular. And Takeshi Kitano, as always, is something of a kind of unique, brooding screen presence. That's what this film has. It's not as brooding, but if nothing else, Rutger Hauer is a unique screen presence.
Yeah.
This film, like you said, though, unlike the 2003 version, which is legitimately fantastic, this is a mixed bag because I'm not sure anyone knows quite what movie they want to make. And that goes right down to TriStar, the production company of this movie. And the fact that it's called Blind Fury, like you said, this should be called like The Blind Swordsman, but it's 1989. They're like, we've got to, you know, like you said, this is the era of the white samurai. It's got to be aggressive. There's no fury. There's zero fury. The posters are completely out of whack. They all look, when I grew up, I remember the posters from going to the video shop. I was like, this is like a serious samurai movie. It's goofy as fuck. Like the new poster you see now, that's representative of the film you see, not the posters that they released in 1989. And you see it throughout the movie. The tone for me, because again, going into this fresh, for like the first 30 minutes, I was like, I don't know what this movie is.
I thought they were going to do more. Like when I was a kid, and I haven't seen it for a while, but I have seen it a few times. But when you start the film off, not in Vietnam, but when he's in Miami, and you have the nice doggy section, and then he gets to the bar, and they give him the sorriest burrito in air quotes I have ever seen in my life.
It really is a depressing burrito.
Yeah, and then he beats him up by doing the usual, you know, I'm a master, but I'm gonna pretend I have accidents side of it.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to get more of that, but basically that was it for the accident thing. And all of a sudden, he just becomes the best swordsman in the world ever, fighting guys with guns. And all right, we'll get to the bad guys now in Neck They Are in a bit. But
so many bad guys. So many bad guys.
It was so inept. But when you have that and you think, oh, like you said, they didn't know what film they were making because you start off with comedy of errors, but this guy is a master at what he does, and then all of a sudden you get to Nick's house.
Mhm.
Sorry, not Nick's house, Frank's ex-wife's house, played
Evil
by
Lynn.
Evil Lynn, who
Oh, I've got a lot to say about her.
yeah.
I've got some shit to say about her.
Every time I see Meg Foster in a film, and I think because when I first saw Meg Foster, obviously it was Evil Lynn.
Mhm.
So
Same here.
when whenever I see her elsewhere, I think, why has she got the Evil Lynn eyes? And then after a while, you go, no, no, they're Meg Foster's eyes. So
Mhm.
anytime I see her, I always think she's gonna become evil.
Yeah, yeah.
Like she couldn't be the doting mother in this film. I couldn't get over it.
No, right. The first issue you have is, like you said, the eyes. The fact that she just inherently looks evil. It's just one of those things. She just has evil eyes. And that whole sequence, again, you've got to remember this is coming after like the quite dark, very serious introduction in Vietnam, where his friend abandons him, he goes blind, and then we run straight into this comedy sketch in the bar with the burrito and the bad guys and stuff, and the music suddenly gets all kind of goofy and stuff. And then you run into, as you say, Frank Devereaux's house. Oh, sorry, is her name? It is Lynn, isn't it? Sorry, Lynn,
Lynn,
her
yeah.
actual name, the character's name. And he goes to Lynn's house. And suddenly you've got her not only with her eyes, but her line delivery. She clearly doesn't know what film she's in because it's so fucking bizarre that again, I'm like, wait, what is this movie? And then the action starts. And of course, one of the first things he does, Rutger Hauer, is cut off someone's hands. And I'm like, oh shit, this is going to be like legit. This is, again, I'm thinking of like 2003 Zatoichi. It's like when he kills people, they added like the CG blood. So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe it'll be like a nod to, the Japanese cinema. There'll be a lot of blood. That's the only bit of genuine violence you see in the whole film. The rest of it is PG-13 violence where they cut people. There's no real blood. Slag, fucking hell, what a character name.
I wanted to
Slag
get
gets
the
like
slag.
a clumsily, kind of implemented scar on his face. But for the most part, that's the only bit of genuine violence for the film. So yeah, I'm watching it. I see the hand go off. I actually really like that sequence, despite the fact that it's fucking bananas. The cops in that scene, or quote unquote cops, they can't act for shit.
The way the one copper, the one that doesn't get his arm cut off, is going round the corner, the way he's holding his gun. And the thing is, I was thinking, dude, that guy was pulled straight off a stage show. He didn't know what he was doing. The best
Yeah.
acting in this whole film was Slag's cigar. How the fuck that thing managed to stay in his
It's
mouth?
weird because Randall Tex Cobb, who played him,
Yep.
like as soon as I saw him, I was like, is he playing the same character? Because I know him primarily from one other film, and it's from Raising Arizona.
Yeah.
And he's playing like the perennial tough guy. They actually push it up. Like he's almost like a mythical bad guy in that way. He's driving around in his hog. He's covered in oil and filth, but he's smoking the same kind of cigarillo that he does in this film that is in his mouth the whole time. It does make him look even more gross. But I didn't know much about Randall Tex Cobb, but I'm not sure about how much research you did on him. But holy shit, dude was like, he was a professional kickboxer, but more importantly, he was a notable heavyweight boxer. I had no idea. Like, he had 42 wins from 51 fights, including fights against the likes of Ken Norton and a heavyweight championship fight against Larry Holmes. Suppose, like, he was famous for his iron chin, and he got his ass whooped for 15 rounds by Larry Holmes, to the extent that he was busted up so badly over those 15 rounds that famous sports commentator Howard Cosell vowed to never cover another professional fight after watching it. Because supposedly it came like a few weeks after a guy died from a brain hemorrhage just after a fight. And of course, he's watching Randall Tex Cobb just getting his ass handed to him by, and let's be clear, like Ken Norton's Larry Holmes is one of the greats. Beats him up for 15 rounds, but he's like Homer fucking Simpson. He just doesn't go down. And he was like, it was so brutal, he didn't want to take on another fight. But like, he beat Leon Spinks. Leon Spinks defeated Muhammad Ali for the title in 1978. So Randall Tex Cobb is this guy I just know from the movies, this bad guy. I'm like, no, he is a proper, legitimate heavyweight boxer. And I would say, without question, outside of Rutger Hauer, the greatest screen presence in the movie. Like, he's the one that stands out. Because as I mentioned, as much as I enjoyed some of the back and forth between, say, McCready and Cobb, I thought you were going to go with the intro, like, oh, God damn it, man, get me Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee is dead.
Yeah.
Get me his brother. It's like, I like all that, but there's not, like, I was halfway through the film. I'm like, who's the boss, McCready or Cobb? And then at the end of the film, you get this other dude showing up with like a mullet. McCready
the yuppies.
Yeah, like McCready seems terrified of him for some reason. I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? You know, at the end, when they do the Predator shootout, they've just got every bad guy who showed up in the film and they've given them all an Uzi for some reason. I'm like, I don't know who any of these guys are. I don't know. I'm so glad you mentioned the fact that the drugs were just called drugs. I'm like,
Drugs.
why do we give a fuck about these? I had no idea what was going
The
on.
script, it was amazing. You said a lot in there. I need to unpack. No, it's fine. The first thing I wanted to unpack was Randall Tex Cobb. The only thing I know him from, other than this, I can't remember him raising Arizona. I've only ever seen it once. But he was the guy that chased down Ace Ventura at the beginning when Ace Ventura kidnapped his dog.
Oh yeah.
So that's so that's where I know him from. The other thing, when we talk about Slag, is the way he's leaning over the kid and Frank's now new missus and holding a shotgun at him at the end. Like he's doing some weird what's his name? Fucking I can't even
Frank's new missus. Oh yeah. Wait,
yeah.
You're not talking about Annie, are you?
Yeah, the one with the glasses.
Yeah. Again, talk about things that I don't know what's going on. Annie is another one of those things in this film. Like, who and what is Annie in this film? No idea. Sorry, mate. Carry on.
Burt Reynolds. When Burt Reynolds did that weird naked pose on the bear.
Oh yeah.
So he's doing that pose, and then the other thing I love. You said they pulled every bad guy to shoot the gondola at the end, right?
Oh yeah.
Even the guys who were just hotel security in the casino. Like that wrestler. What was that wrestler's name?
The wrestler. He's from. He was a Korean wrestler, wasn't he? Chung Lee.
WWE for a bit.
Tiger Chung Lee. He was
Chung
also.
Lee, yeah.
He was also in Red Heat in the famous steam room scene at the start of the film when he holds like the coal in his hand.
Yeah,
he's the one standing across from him. The other big guy, he's Jay Pennison. He's a former NFL player from the Redskins and I think it was the Oilers he played for back in the day. So yeah, they were just like, because we've had these guys and obviously visually they make an impact. Like even when he goes into the lift in the casino and he runs upstairs and then again, just two random giant black dudes with Uzis, they have them show up at the end in cowboy hats. What the fuck is happening here?
Also, the casino manager. He's a casino manager who was holding Frank hostage in a room. Why is he there just shooting at? Like,
I think that was the
actual villain at the end of this.
That was the big issue. I was like, okay, I think it was McCready, but like I said, because there is one point where McCready's telling Cobb what to do, but there are other times when Cobb's playing Billy Big Bollocks. And I was like, I think I know what's going on. And like you said, that last sequence with the gondola, where I don't know how they got at the bottom of that gondola or how that was a plan, but whatever. And they have them all lining up in what clearly must have been a nod to Predator. And they just shoot the shit out of it. And there's like 12 of them. And I'm like, I don't really know what anyone's relation is, either to the story, to themselves, why they give, like, there are points when they seem to be very aware of Rutger Hauer's character. I keep calling him Rutger Hauer's character. Sorry, Nick Parker. Other times when they don't seem to give a shit. And right, we are ragging on this film, and this film has loads of problems. But just to be clear, I had a lot of fun watching this film.
Oh yeah, no, it's a fun ride. It is a fun ride. What I loved at the end, and I know we're jumping straight to the end, but there was a lot in the end. When you had Terry O'Quinn's character, Frank, what was it, Frank Devereaux? When he had his come to Jesus moment about, I'm going to rescue my kid.
Yeah.
And he does the oil and water or whatever it is, bottle napalm that he can. They also, costume designers gave him his little, my jacket thing where I can hide everything. But they just basically gave him a flasher jacket. I couldn't get over it. It was just literally just a flasher jacket that I'm expecting him to run around just doing that to everybody. Sorry, we're on podcast, opening his jacket. But I know we haven't mentioned a lot about Rutger Hauer, and there's a lot to talk to him about that. But I just want to go back to the drugs for a second.
Yeah, please. I'd love someone to explain it to me.
Well, I was just trying to understand the McCready's, and did you get... he was Shelley Marcone or Sheldon Marcone in Last Boy Scout.
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
Totally forgot about that.
So
I had too much on my mind watching this movie. I'm amazed I got any notes down. There's just so many things which really don't make much sense. And we've not even got to the fact, like we mentioned all the bad guys. We've not mentioned the Pike brothers, who, let's be clear, and I guarantee you love them. I have no doubt, because I know how you feel about the fucking Wraith. And these are basically the Pike brothers with Nick Cassavetes.
Yeah.
I like them in this film, but again, another example of two guys who are in a completely different movie. And again, I don't know if they're playing for like chuckles, if they're trying to do broad comedy, but then he's like, suck on my wound to Annie. I'm like, God damn, dude, that's fucking nasty as hell. And there's like this kind of like almost like sexual, like they're being quite threatening in the car. But then the next thing you know, they're kind of running down the street, Dukes of Hazzard style, shooting, at random strangers. No cops to be seen anywhere. And again, it's another one of those parts where it's like, on paper, I conceptually like it. I'd like the scene in and of itself. Does it fit in with the rest of the movie? No, not in the fucking slightest.
The Pike brothers had the worst line in the film as well, when they shot up the gondola again. That thing's got more holes than my daddy's rubber. Daddy wore a rubber?
Yeah, well, that's like, even in that moment, they do have fun lines, and I like them. But especially like Nick Cassavetes, like in The Wraith and stuff, he's great at playing an asshole. He's just like top tier, like on-screen asshole.
Yeah.
But again, does he fit in with McCready and with Cobb and all these other guys? No, not really. And some of the blame has to go down to the director, Philip Noyce. I'm not sure if he wrote it as well, but it's weird with Philip Noyce because he's one of those directors you've probably not heard of. And certainly one I hadn't heard of, bizarrely, until before this podcast, before I knew we were doing Blind Fury. But out of the blue now, I just can't escape him. And I think one of the reasons, he's one of those directors who has like a very solid body of work over like 40 years or something, but he doesn't have that quote unquote signature movie. Like if you look at his films, like he done like Patriot Games, Salt, Rabbit Proof Fence, which was a pretty big deal, The Bone Collector, Clear and Present Danger, The Saint. Yeah. These are all pretty big films, but I think if you asked anyone on the street who directed any of those, they wouldn't know. And, but when I was listening to, the reason he came up initially was he was doing an interview, and I think maybe it speaks to his directorial style that he spoke almost, he was supposed to be speaking about Fast Charlie with Pierce Brosnan. And I watched that last week, funny enough, on Amazon, which he directed.
Yeah, that's just popped up on Amazon.
Yeah, it was actually James Caan's last movie. I was shocked to see him in it because it's only just come out, but it was filmed like 2.5-3 years ago. But he is a very practical filmmaker. In his interview, he was supposed to be talking about the film, and he ended up talking almost exclusively about the practicalities of filmmaking. It was a really interesting interview where he was talking about like the subsequent impact of audience test screening scores and focus testing on budgets. It's like, if you get above this score, you can get this amount of money. If you get this score, you're not going to get any funding at all. And you can almost see it in his movies that he's just this like really, it sounds almost disingenuous to say, he's competent. But that's what it feels like in this film. Like, there's nothing particularly flashy about it, and nothing that makes you, this is a Philip Noyce film. But it benefits on the one side from being a well-made, largely well-acted movie, but somebody needed to rein in the tone and decide what the fuck was going on, because it's too many things, and that impacts on the narrative, it impacts on the character, it impacts on the tone, everything. And by the end, I was like, I enjoyed that, but I don't know what the fuck it was. It's weird because if you go back and look at the reviews, a lot of them were actually really positive about the tone, about the combination of comedy, of action, of all these of martial arts and stuff. But it doesn't, like, we did The Mummy a few weeks ago, and that's like the perfect example of a movie that nails multiple genres. Like that did the comedy, it did the horror, it did the romance, and somehow it nailed all of them, and everything came together and just felt right. In this film, it doesn't land the plane. It doesn't quite get it. There's still great stuff in it, but yeah, make no mistake, it's a mess of a movie. But as I said at the start, and we've not talked about him yet, it's held together by a properly charming, surprisingly light Rutger Hauer performance. And I say light because I think we're all accustomed to, he's very much playing against type here, isn't he? Like I certainly associated him with dark, brooding characters. He has his demons in this movie, but nothing like what we associate usually with this character. And his comedic timing is good. He's good with the kid who's annoying as fuck. So yeah, I think he makes the movie work.
He does. He does really well. And like I said, there is a bit of trivia about what he does with being blind. And he said, I learned everything I need to be blind by spending a month with a blind guy. Okay.
I mean, I'll say I was convinced by him. I actually thought, like, if I didn't know anything about Rutger Hauer, and I think if I was watching this film and someone said, it's actually a blind dude, I think I would have believed them. Like, there's something about the way he plays his role.
Blankness behind, he's able to deliver the blankness behind the eyes. Like, There's nothing there.
Do you know what? The difference is? Sorry to butt in, but I think the difference is a lot of people, when they're playing a blind character, and especially if he was playing a samurai or something, I think that in the back of their mind, they would have this like, I've still got to look cool thing.
Yeah.
But he actually picks up a lot of the mannerisms, which I would associate with like a blind person, where they're like their head's almost off to the side because they're thinking about their motions instead of like they're not thinking like. I think in a lot of films there would still almost be this element of eye contact, but his eyes like wander, his head wanders, and it's a genuinely convincing performance. I think, at least. Maybe somebody who's no, that doesn't work. I was going to say somebody who's blind would tell you otherwise. They're not going to fucking know. But I think he's very good in this.
What I like about it is, except from the beginning, usually when you have like blind actors, people playing blind actors, Ben Affleck from Daredevil comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of wearing the glasses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In action scenes and things like that, you're wearing the glasses. 100%. So you're hiding that expression that's behind the eyes. He's not doing that.
No.
He is literally, you have the glasses at the beginning, but as soon as he gets to the burrito bar, should we say, they're gone.
Yeah, and it's a bold move. It really is.
Yeah. And he does it really well. Sorry.
He does, and the thing is as well, he's one of those guys, like, I think he's not scared of like not again that idea of not looking cool, because I mean maybe it's because if you read his IMDb, it literally the top line reads blonde, blue-eyed, tall and handsome. I'm like, Jesus Christ, this reads more like a dating profile than a kind of sum up of his career. But he is a handsome dude and he's trying to be a leading man, and like you said, it is an esoteric performance, but he totally makes it work. And one of the other things, I mentioned earlier about, while there's like loads of problems with this film, as I mentioned with the tone, one of the reasons I think it actually really works, because this basically is a retelling of Zatoichi Challenged, which, it's basically just taking the core story of like the kid, obviously his name isn't Billy in the film. And I think there are nods to Zatoichi Challenged in the fact that that's why they end up at a ski resort at the end, because that movie ends with a fight in the snow. So I think I've got to believe that kind of, the scene at the end is at a ski resort simply as a nod to that movie.
Can I ask a question as well? Sorry. Sorry. But you said, you mentioned a ski resort now, and it's Reno, isn't it? And
it's Reno, yeah.
Reno, Nevada, yeah?
Yeah, it's like budget Vegas, basically. Okay, so it's kind of northwest of Vegas.
But Nevada.
Yeah, it's right on the border with California.
Typically a desert.
Yes.
So where's the ski resort and how do they get there so quickly?
I don't know. The only thing I'll say is it is Nevada, but it's North Nevada. And there is, you get strange weather in that part of the world where, at certain times of year, maybe it does go a bit more extreme. I know when we think of Nevada, we immediately think of like Vegas and, you just think of it like this arid desert, but maybe, and I want to believe that they've done the right thing there, because a lot of it is shot on location. You can see that they've gone to these American towns, and that was one of the reasons it was celebrated, is that it felt like a genuine American movie. Like, it wasn't all just in one place. They travel around, blah, blah, blah. So I'd be surprised if that just geographically at least doesn't make any sense, but it is strange to us at least seeing them suddenly at a ski resort. And maybe they've just been like, listen, we're doing a nod to the movie, who gives a fuck if it makes sense or not. But to come briefly back to my point, it's only quick, but one of the reasons I think it actually works quite well is that this is a reimagining of that story rather than a remake. So a truly Western take on the source material, basically, unlike, say, the ill-advised likes of what I always think of is Spike Lee's Old Boy. I'm not sure if you've seen Old Boy, the original.
Yeah, I have, yeah.
But the problem with Spike Lee's Old Boy isn't that it's a terrible film. It's not. But it's trying to be too much like the original, to the point where if you've seen, and I get it, it's for an audience who, like, people just don't want to read subtitles. I get it. But when it's being critiqued, it'll be critiqued by people who have seen the original, who won't mind subtitles, and they'll look at it and go, well, why am I watching this when I could just watch the original, the Korean original? And that was my problem with the film. The Spike Lee version, it's fine, but it encourages unflattering comparisons. Whereas this isn't anything like it. It loosely takes the premise, but it does the wise thing of just really making it. It's like, all right, we're just taking the premise and then we're doing our own American thing, to the point where it feels completely separate. And I think, again, that's one of the reasons it works. And it doesn't encourage you to kind of always compare it with, say, obviously it wouldn't have been the 2003 version because that wasn't out yet, but certainly the 60s TV show, because it's like, well, this is totally its own thing. So I think more movies could learn from that. If you're adapting, say, a Korean movie, Japanese movie, whatever, it's like, don't take it so literally. Turn it into an actual American movie and just take the concept instead.
Well, I actually like, it's not a samurai. I know we've said samurai and it's classed as like the blind samurai and things like that. Mm-hmm. but he's just a sword master because he didn't learn to be a samurai from a Vietnamese guy in a Vietnamese jungle.
No, no. Like I
Yeah.
don't know what the martial arts are, the state of martial arts in Vietnam, but 100%, he's not a samurai.
No.
No, and although it is weird, again, one of those things that's kind of like brushed over at the start of the film, where they try and give him like a Naruto style anime haircut to make him look younger,
Yeah,
but they
that
suddenly
was
go
amazing.
they suddenly go 20 years later. I'm like, motherfucker looks exactly the same.
Also, I know you said it's just now. You said I need to briefly get back to my point. At some point, 20 minutes ago, I wanted to talk about the drugs, and we totally just
Oh, sorry, mate.
yeah,
Sorry,
you totally derailed that. But now we're on the thing. I want to talk about the fact that Rutger Hauer never feels like a big man. Now, maybe he is, maybe he was like 6 foot tall or something.
he is described on IMDb as being both tall and handsome. So,
Okay. But when he's learning the movements and hugging the little
Ooh.
Asian master.
Yeah, he looks big there.
Yeah, I know.
That was the thing. I was like, how big is Rutger Hauer or how small is that? I think it's a combination of two. I suspect Rutger Hauer was probably around 6'1", 6'2", something like that. Yeah, he's Danish as well. Isn't he? It feels like all Danish people are pretty fucking tall. But I don't know, man. Like, again, that sequence at the start, the whole training sequence, it takes itself relatively seriously. And again, I have to kind of put myself in that position because I didn't know where the movie was going at that point. I was like, oh, this is going to be like a proper take on Zatoichi. He'll learn, master the art and stuff. But at one minute he's hugging this little Vietnamese dude, and then the next thing you're getting the burrito sequence. But then it kind of comes full circle, and we've mentioned the fact that. Sorry, mate. Before I go on, did you want to talk any more about the drugs?
Well, we didn't talk anything about the drug.
Can I mention one more thing? Because you're gonna. All right, we've talked about the bad guys. As if this movie didn't have enough bad guys. I love at the end, they're just going to introduce a random Japanese guy to fight him as a ninja. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's clearly, it's clearly just an excuse to get Sho Kosugi in the movie. And make no mistake, for those who don't know, Sho Kosugi was to ninjas in the 80s what Al Leon was to henchmen in the 80s. He was just America's go-to actual ninja. And they were just like, we're going to get him in this film. But narratively, you've got so many bad guys. Like, don't worry, guys. Despite the fact that we have all of these guns, I'm going to bring in a Japanese dude with a sword to fight him. Like, okay, sure. Wait, is this an 80s movies or is it? I've seen so many different things. I think it was filmed in 89, but maybe released in the States in 1990, and hence the confusion.
I think it was released elsewhere in 89, but maybe in 90.
States, yeah.
It's an 89 film.
I'm going to call it an 80s film, despite the fact I think it didn't come out in the States until early 1990.
But you're right, Sho Kosugi. I mean, I'm looking at his IMDb, right? And aside from his first film, apparently being The Godfather Part 2, the rest of these are amazing. Enter the Ninja, Revenge of the Ninja, Ninja 3, The Domination, 9 Deaths of the Ninja.
Oh, that's spectacular. That's spectacular. God bless him.
Up to the point, his last film apparently was 2009's Ninja Assassin.
Oh, the one with Rain, the Korean pop star. Yeah, that's not a bad film, actually. Bethan loves it because Rain gets, she's a big fan of Rain. I mean, he's a very handsome boy, and he gets very topless and very greasy in that movie. So, yeah. It was weird because they never actually came back to him, and I thought that movie did relatively okay because the first time he popped up, I actually introduced Beth to him via, of all things, the Wachowski brothers Speed Racer. He was in that. And then my wife was one of these early adopters of Korean pop music because of that, because I started showing her videos online, and then I didn't go to Korea, I actually went to Japan, and the HMV in Shinjuku had a Korean pop section. I bought back this, because they always do elaborate albums and stuff. So I bought back a Rain album, and this led to this collection of Korean pop music. And because Bethan was, early doors, this is well before Gangnam Style and stuff, it's she would import all the albums and spend a fortune. And now, of course, they're fucking everywhere, and they're all just on Spotify. But we've got, you probably can't see in the video, we've got this huge selection of really elaborate Korean pop albums. So they're just sitting there on the shelf. But yeah, strange that it didn't seem to take off from there in terms of Western movies for Rain. Yeah. But sorry, that was an aside. I do apologize.
That's okay. Drugs. Right. Yes, I have to ask.
Go for it, buddy.
Was Frank Devereaux cheated out of his money when he was gambling because they knew he could make drugs? Or was that just a side? Oh, this guy owes us money, but he's a chemist. He can make the drug. But what is the drug? Like, I don't understand what the drug is because the drug is crystal. Do they smoke it? Do they
Mhm.
melt it down? Is it taken
See,
intravenously?
the problem is you're asking me this question, and it's bizarre because it feels like everything you're asking me is like it's all new information. I'm like, oh yeah, was it that? Was it like I really nothing about his part of the storyline, about Frank's storyline with the drugs and McCready, it just didn't connect with me at all. By the end, I remember they made this big deal where they opened the box and it was this magical blue drug, and I was like, oh yeah, what the fuck is that about?
Do you know what that looked like as well? It looked like that. I can't even think of the word, so I'm not going to say it. But when you get the dehumidifiers and they've got the
Hundred
crystals,
percent,
and
hundred
then the
percent.
crystals turn into. It looked like
Yeah,
like that,
it looks like
a
the
decusant.
stuff
Is
that
it
you keep
decusant?
yeah, that you keep in your toilet. That's what it looks like
Yeah.
to
So
dehumidify.
also, what's McCready's plan? Because McCready's rich, he can hire Bruce Lee's brother. He's got
Mm-hmm.
all these guys on retainer that all have guns. That's fine.
Yeah,
What's his plan? Is like they briefly
just
mention that
drugs.
they briefly mention him and the hotel manager
Mhm.
that they needed some money, I think, for
That's why I got the
the
impression.
hotel
Like,
expansion. So he's selling these drugs, is it?
if this was a better written movie, I think the situation they're almost hinting at is kind of like Le Chiffre in Casino Royale, where
Hmm.
he's the bad guy, but he's indebted to someone else and therefore quite desperate and therefore willing to go. And that's why you get the dude with the mullet and stuff at the end. Like McCready's actually quite desperate to get these drugs, whatever the fuck they are, because he needs the money and because he owes someone. I don't quite know. All that stuff is so poorly told and so pushed to the background that you don't care. Again, I think the idea with the script, again, I think it's a Le Chiffre thing, which is really always really interesting. That's what one of the reasons Casino Royale is maybe my favorite Bond film is not only is Mads Mikkelsen putting an amazing performance, but instead of him being this big evil, I want to rule the world, of course he's evil, but he's also desperate because
Yeah.
he's serving an even more evil master. And he's like, if this doesn't work for me, I'm gonna be killed. So it adds stakes, and I think that's what they're trying to do in this film, but it fails miserably. And again, every time I start thinking about this film, I'm like, more bad guys. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for more movies having disposable hillbillies. But
Yeah.
why do they just randomly have the hillbilly death squad halfway through the film? Again, I guess just to be disposable
Oh,
hillbillies,
well,
but it's such a
when
big
Slag
swing.
when Slag thought, you know what, this dude's blind. He's not going to see me on top of this shack in the middle of a cornfield. The
Oh,
way he's like Slag must have got very tired during this film because aside from the beginning, he is
mhm.
laying down or sitting down for the rest of the film. I love when Rutger Hauer, Nick Parker, just slices the shack. It's a corrugated iron shack or corrugated
Yeah.
metal, and
Mhm.
he cuts one bit of it and it falls down.
Yeah, it's
Going back to I had this written down in my notes, right? Going back to Slag. You said
mhm.
about the films he was in, and like he
Mhm.
apparently a legitimate tough guy. Do you know he was in a film, an 80s film called Collision Course? 89 as well. Have you ever heard of this film?
I haven't. It feels like
So,
nowadays every film we go back to, it feels like it's always 1989. How many films
yeah.
released in 1989? It's crazy.
So I have never heard of Collision Course either. So it's
Which
got
says something for how deep in the reeds this movie is. If you've not, if you haven't seen it, is one thing. If you haven't heard of it, unbelievable.
it's a buddy cop film, right? A
Mhm.
Japanese investigator and a Detroit cop team up to track down a stolen prototype turbocharger, right?
Sounds awesome.
Yeah. The Japanese investigator, Pat Morita,
Oh, that's
Mr.
pretty
Movie.
cool.
The tough as nails Detroit cop, Jay
Nope.
Leno.
Jay Leno and Pat Morita in a movie together.
Yes.
I mean, Jesus, I like not. I'm more amazed that you haven't seen it slash own it on DVD
I'm
and
so
Blu-ray
upset.
than I am the fact that it exists.
I'm so upset. I've never heard of this film to the point where I have to rectify it.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
dude.
think
That sounds like if you got AI to describe a movie that Rob definitely owns, they might literally come up with a samurai cop movie from 1989 starring Pat Morita and Jay Leno. Like that might literally be what I came up with. So yeah, I am amazed to hear that you haven't heard of that, but I kind of want to see it as well now. So
if we can find it, we're going to have to do it on a podcast. A film that we both haven't seen.
or
That's
even
gonna
heard
be
of, which is
yeah.
unbelievable. But yeah, this. I mean, are we going to bother going into the whole Annie thing? Like the fact that she just doesn't work.
Well, I mean,
She's like the
she's
performance is actually okay. What's her
she does
name?
all
I
right,
do.
but what I don't
Lisa
understand with
Black.
Annie
Is it
is
Lisa Blunt? Sorry,
she working for Shelley Macone, and I'm going to call him Shelley Macone because I can't. McCready.
McCready.
Is
Yeah,
she
yeah.
working? So she works for him. She's a girl who delivers the drinks to the tables. I get that. But is she part of his secret drug plan?
Again, I'm like, is it because she works at the casino by default? She like has to do whatever he says. But then there was almost like this hint that she didn't want to do any of this, but she had to. Again, almost as if she was indebted to him in some way. But then she totally turns on them like almost immediately because
Well, when you're
Nick
made to
has to.
suck a guy's thumb,
Yeah, when it's bleeding, like
yeah.
maybe that was like the line. But again, it felt like there was this whole backstory which just doesn't exist in this movie. And maybe it's because like the movie's like 86 minutes long, which I'm all for. Make no mistake. I love nothing more than seeing a movie's 86 minutes long. Like fucking awesome. You can watch this on a Tuesday night, no problem. This movie probably needed another 10 to 15 minutes to
Yeah.
cook. Even the stuff with Frank and Nick, I thought it was a bit underbaked. I could see what they were going for with the whole like he abandoned him in Vietnam. I didn't think it was actually clear that he abandoned him in the opening sequence. It was only later. I was like, oh, I see. He abandoned
he
him.
ran
Blah,
away
blah,
from
blah.
him.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it almost becomes, but Nick didn't seem to be that fussed about it. Like it seemed to be almost more of a Frank kind of story in that regard. So yeah, I'm not sure if that worked either. It has a lot of interesting ideas, and as I said, tonally, it's when it works, it's fantastic. But because none of the narrative strands really connect, it means that you have this weird up and down tonal movie where it's like you're almost like 1 minute it's like, oh, this is all fun and games. It brings in the ridiculous score. It's like I said, quite goofy. And then the next minute, it's almost implying that you should care about this. And the problem is, I just never did. It was fun.
Yeah.
I just never gave a shit
No,
about anyone or anything in this film. I didn't care
it's a
about
fun
Billy.
ride, but
Sorry.
it's a fun ride, but it's not one where you're in love with any of the characters or you want to see like you want to follow the characters because
No,
A, there's too many characters, and
100%.
B, I kind of understand. Well, no, I'm guessing why there's too many characters and why there's too many little set pieces. It's cocaine in the writers' room again.
It is cocaine in the writer's room. And the thing is,
Sorry,
like we said,
it's drug in the writers' room.
it's blue drug. It's blue toilet drug in the writer's room. But it does get by, despite, again, we are criticizing this film. There is plenty, to critique with this film, but it does get by. But like, we don't care about the narrative, but I still enjoy all the characters. Like that's what makes the film work. Is that even though I don't care what's happening to the characters, I'm enjoying the performances. So whether it be, I mentioned the fact that Frank Devereaux doesn't connect with me in any way in this film, but I like Terry O'Quinn's performance. The Pike brothers, do they belong in this film? I don't know, but Nick Cassavetes and Rick Overton, I like them in this film. Annie, what the fuck is she doing? I don't know, but Lisa Blount is like she's charming as fuck. So I like her. I just don't give a shit what she's doing in the movie, which is a problem, but it gets by regardless because, as I said, it's directed well, it's acted well, and it's a brisk 84 minutes. And obviously we're tearing this film to pieces. Oh, we're going, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. But it took until like the 80th minute for me to realize, I'm like, oh yeah, the drug thing, what's Annie up to? And it was almost like, well, obviously I didn't care. And that was fine. Yeah. It's only when I look back, I'm like, wait a minute, none of this makes any sense. But just to be clear, when I was watching it, I also kind of didn't give a shit. So.
Well, you enjoy it, like you said, it's a fast ride. There's things to keep you entertained on screen. It is literally the film version of Speed. It just keeps you entertained and just keeps you going.
Well, that's
Speed
the thing.
the drug, not Speed the.
Yeah. Well, it's just like just as you like might start asking, it's like, wait, what's up with these blue drugs? Suddenly he cuts a dude's eyebrows off, and you're like, oh, I don't care again. And then
fucking eyebrows.
Right, that doesn't make any sense, by the way. Like that doesn't make any the way he cuts across. How the fuck is he cutting off his eyebrows? Yeah. Like you would have to go surely from below rather than across. I don't.
Everything as well. When Billy's sleeping, and there's a reason why we haven't mentioned Billy, and we're not going to mention Billy because he's fucking awful.
He's rough. Yeah, he's rough.
When Billy's sleeping, and he cuts the hornet or whatever it is flying above him. All of a sudden, when the hornet laid on the floor in half, that thing was fucking massive.
It was, and you also got that bizarre scene because there's suddenly a campsite. I don't quite know how they got to that campsite, but you get two old dudes, so an old gentleman and his wife, I assume. And they're like, did you see that? We should get one of those. I'm like, what? A sword or a
Or a
blind
blind
dude?
man.
It's, like, it's such a. I'm like, why are you at the campsite again? This film always encourages you to ask questions, just not the questions you like. Maybe it thinks it should be encouraging you
Yeah.
to ask. It's a strange film, but like I said, even at the end, like Sho Kosugi shows up for no reason. It's a shame that the fight with Slag is so underwhelming at the end because it feels like they're building up to it. Like Slag keeps like reappearing throughout the film. You're like, oh, there's going to be this big showdown, and instead of the showdown with Slag, you get a showdown with Sho Kosugi, which is fun. That's like the high point. But then the stuff with MacReady and Slag again, it just kind of falls by the
Yeah.
wayside. So
I have
yeah.
I have trouble with Slag as well, just because of obviously it's a name in for us in the UK. It's completely different. So when you call him a
Yeah.
slag or you call him slag, you're just like, oh shit.
Yeah, it certainly has very unique and specific connotations in the UK to call someone slag. Like to be clear, that would be a bigger deal in most movies. It's just there's so much going on in this film that we've hardly got any time to deal with the fact that his character is called Slag,
Slag.
which is again, it might not be as mental in the States because slag has a much more literal, definitive meaning, whereas in the UK, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't call him a slag at a glance, put it that way. He doesn't scream
No,
slag.
it's
So,
I
oh
mean,
god.
it's the problem we have as well when we try and say cigarette.
Oh yeah. And the
Yeah,
fag and
yeah,
everything. Yeah.
yeah.
It just doesn't work. Anything else to add before we move on to favorite scene?
Let me check those notes. Let me check those notes. I think we've covered everything.
I think so. There was a lot to cover, and yeah, you can only go so deep into some of these things because it's absolutely
Yeah.
bananas. And my favorite scene is bananas. We've
Oh,
mentioned it a
sorry,
few
one more
times.
thing I wanted to mention. Sorry,
Oh
I
yeah,
did
go
have
for
it.
it, buddy.
You said about the hillbillies in the cornfield.
Hmm.
A random guy just eating a bag of popcorn in a cornfield.
Just like the strangest affectation. Like he thinks he's like a big enough deal that he's come on set and go, I think I'm just going to eat this popcorn. It's like, why? I just think it'd make my character pop on the screen. It does. We're talking about it. Does he need to be constantly eating popcorn? And a terrible hillbilly hitman. He's immediately terrified. Clearly
Yeah.
doesn't want to be there.
Do you know his friend who was and I've never seen anybody in my life dual wield revolvers. That looked strange to me.
Well, again, this is the era of the big guns, which,
Yeah.
like, obviously we think of like Predator and all these massive guns, but the late 80s in particular introduced, we've mentioned a bunch of films we've covered, gigantic handguns with huge scopes. Uzis were big back then,
Yeah.
a lot of dual wielding. So instead of going from like assault rifles, it was a lot of like handguns, but like outrageous handguns. And like
Yeah.
89 is kind of like the peak of that. So,
And this is super unique to just us, right, in the UK. So I apologize to our American listeners. But my God, the guy that dual wielded the revolvers,
mhm.
did he or did he not look like Jimmy Cranky?
He did look like Jimmy Cranky, and that is maybe the most British thing. That is of the perhaps the most British reference we will ever make on this podcast. There is no way out of like 350 million Americans that a single one of them has ever heard of Jimmy fucking Cranky. So yeah, very British indeed.
It was. I couldn't believe it. I said, well, Jimmy Cranky's just gone over to the States and done Blind Fury.
Yeah, and it's a distinct image to paint, like Jimmy Cranky with two dual wielding two revolvers.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, the stuff of nightmares.
Right. That's it. Favorite scene.
Yeah, favorite scene. So it is when Nick is defending Billy and Lynn from Slag and the Corrupt Cops. Tonally, I think it encapsulates everything in this movie because it's everywhere. Like it's when it's at its most violent, it's when it's its most goofy, it's also when it's at its most heartfelt, despite the fact that we have the evil Lynn eyes. That scene has everything that this movie encapsulates in one sequence. Obviously, Slag's there. It has bad acting. It has good acting with Ruka Hauer. It is an absolutely bonkers 5 minutes, which sums up what ultimately turns out into being a bonkers 85, 86-minute movie. So yeah, that's my favorite part of the film. That was when I knew I was on board. I was like, okay, I think I'm getting what this film is now. Because I was trying to pigeonhole it early doors. I was like, is this serious? Is it fun? I don't know. And then I watched that sequence. I was like, oh, it's all of these things. It's all of these things and none of these things. So yeah, that's my favorite sequence. Oh, you've gone silent, sir. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I've just realized there's a problem with my microphone wire, so I'm gonna have to get this changed. Uh,
Cool.
I did ignore the fact that it's got holes all over it, so I'll sort that out for
Yeah.
next week.
Probably going to need that.
Yeah. Uh, for me, it's definitely the beginning because
Mhm.
although I like this film, I chose this film. I have a great time with this film. The beginning promises something different
Mhm,
when he's
mhm.
training to be the blind master swordsman and all. It
Yeah.
promises something different of a film, and it's done so well.
Yeah, it's closer to the source. The opening sections before he gets to America are much closer to the source material in terms of tone, in terms of
Yeah,
aesthetic, in terms of what it's going for. Obviously, it still makes it American because the whole Vietnamese angle and stuff like that. But yeah, I thought it was going to be much closer to the source material. Yeah, it goes pretty goofy, pretty fucking quick. But yeah,
yeah, but that's it. I thoroughly enjoyed that scene. I
yeah,
like the rest of the film, no doubt about it.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
that scene definitely promises
But
something, and it's done really well.
if you were like, if you watch this in 1989, if you go into the cinema and you've seen, like, you see the title Blind Fury, and you know what era of cinema this is as well, Blind Fury, you see the poster, and on the poster, it's like he looks like a proper samurai, like a
Yeah,
serious samurai film. You see that opening sequence in Vietnam, you're like, oh, it's fucking action, everything. He's training up in Vietnam. And then suddenly the fucking shift in tone that you get after that, you're like, wait, what the fuck is this? But like, it would have, there's no way this didn't come as a massive surprise to a lot of people, especially in 89, where you wouldn't have watched 72 fucking trailers and read all these articles. But yeah, it would have been very interesting. In terms of loves and hates, number one, despite the fact that it is messy, I do enjoy the combo of comedy and action and heart, which I think Rutger Hauer brings this film in spades.
yeah,
Number two, the aforementioned Rutger Hauer as Nick Parker. I think he's ultimately what makes the movie work more than anything else, whether it be the director, the scripts, the plethora of bad guys. This film doesn't work without Rutger Hauer. And number three, if I was going to pick a bad guy of all those bad guys, it's 100% Randall Tex Cobb as Slag. I love the fact that I've looked into his backstory, all that stuff about a boxer. As I said, to my mind, he was just the dude on the bike with the cigaretto from Raising Arizona, which I watched far too young, and he made an impression. I always remembered him, and then suddenly he's in this film, and it almost feels like the same character because he's got the cigaretto, and he just shows up being evil and gross. So yeah, 100%. With a film with just too many bad guys, at least one of them cuts through the fog.
yeah. For me, it's Rutger Hauer's Nick Parker as well. He's top of the list. He does so well with what he's trying to do. Like I said, it's a change of pace for him. On
Oh
on
yeah,
paper, it shouldn't work, but it works so well. And like I already said when we were talking about it, the fact that he's not hiding his face behind the glasses or anything like that, he
100%. Yeah.
clearly looks blind, like the blankness behind his eyes. He
Well,
does it so well.
yeah, that's great. But as you said, like, one of the things you wouldn't have expected from a Rutger Hauer performance, certainly in 1989, is a genuine warmth, which I think he
Yeah.
brings to this. Like, Billy's annoying and stuff, and we've given him a hard time. Like, I get the idea, like, he's supposed to be an asshole at the start of the film, and then the idea is that he warms to Rutger Hauer, and you're supposed to, and they build up that relationship and stuff. And again, he actually kind of makes that work, that relationship between the two of them. And it all comes from Rutger Hauer's performance, I think.
Yeah. For me, this is a weird love because it's
Mhm.
how it made me feel, which laugh. Like I enjoyed it for the wrong reasons, but the amount of random bad guys that just came out and they're all from different walks of life.
100%. And different movies. 100% different movies as well.
Yeah. So I enjoyed that. And
Mhm.
I think finally for me, just I guess the premise, the story.
Mhm, mhm.
I think if it had some more time,
Oh, there's a
yeah,
good story in this. You can see why they picked specifically the 16th movie from the Zatoichi series. That's not like an accident. They're like, oh, that's an interesting story on paper. It is. And I like even what they've done with potentially with the bad guys, as we already mentioned. I think there's an interesting story for McGreedy in there. I think there's an interesting story for Billy, all these other things. It's just like you said, none of them are given it enough time. But then the other side of that is I'm still kind of happy that this is a really dumb 86-minute movie. So I'm
yeah.
conflicted about pretty much everything with this movie. My loves and hates could go back and forth.
Well, that's what I need to say about like it sounds like I had trouble trying to find my loves, even though I've
Mhm.
said I like this film. And you're gonna know that when my hates come on, because I got a lot more hates than I have loves, but randomly I still love this film. I still think this film is fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, like,
But
and this will come up like in my hates now. Like, I've got here like the tone gets a tad too goofy at times. But then at the same time, I've mentioned the fact that I really enjoyed Nick Cassavetes and Rick Overton as the Pike brothers. But I just think they got a bit too broad. Like I enjoyed them. I'm just like, there was just a point. I'm just like, somebody just needs to turn this down from like a fucking 9 to like a 7, in terms of the broad comedy and all these other things. Number two, I've got Billy is a bit much. He is, but then at the same time, as I just mentioned, I did actually warm to both him and certainly his relationship with Nick as the movie went on, and that was kind of the point. And number three, too many bad guys. Like it is never quite clear what we're fighting about. The whole blue drug things. Do we care about any of this? The answer to all these things is no. But at the same time, when I look back, I have a weird fondness, as you mentioned, for the fact that there are a bajillion bad guys and they're all a bit shit. So it's an odd movie to critique because in many respects it doesn't work, but for the same reasons, it's really fun. So it's a really odd film to review, especially coming to it blind. That was always going to happen. And not having seen it before, knowing very little. And as I said, it was one of these films. I was like, I always remember the posters. The posters have nothing to do with this fucking movie, other than the fact that it's Rutger Hauer with a sword. That's it. There's no Fury. Jesus Christ. Anyway,
there's no Fury.
No, Fury.
I stand by what I said at the even though I had trouble saying it. It's blind indignation. See, I can't say
that
it's blind.
Perfect. Yeah. He's just...
what was your second hate then? Billy is
a bit much.
Okay,
like so I know he's supposed to be annoying, but I was like, the American, and it's a 1989 American kid. He's got the fucking haircut, the shirt, and you're just like, he looks like he looks like he grows up to be on Home Improvements. You're just like, man, another one of those things, like the Pike brothers. I'm just like, you could just turn down his performance just a couple of notches.
You've got a bit. You've gone nice and PC. Billy is a bit much. I went. Billy is a bitch.
Well, Billy is also a bitch. I'll give you that. Yeah.
Billy's a bitch. The other hate pulled out of nowhere randomly, and you're going to say it's a Rob thing. The burrito.
No, that's complete. That is 100. But the fact that it's kind of almost like passed off as like this is where the Mexicans go to eat. To eat that fucking burrito? Are you shit? It was the most depressing fucking Taco Bell at 2 a.m. burrito I've ever seen in my life.
When he poured the sauce into it as well, like he held that over for what felt like a good 30 seconds. Glug 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 glug. Like Jesus Christ, mate.
Yeah, and everything about that scene was it's an odd scene in an odd movie, but that burrito was horrendously depressing. If I don't care where I went, like you're not expecting a masterpiece. It's a dive bar on the side of the road. But I'm like, dude, if you're ordering burritos, it has to be better than that. It just has to be. If anything, if I went into a bar and it was that shitty and I saw those fucking Mexican dudes, I'm like, oh, well, the burritos are probably okay. I'm not sure if that's racist. I don't think it is. But if that's shit, I'm like, I'd go over to them. I'd be like, dude, I get it. He's blind. He doesn't know. That could have been the joke. Not that there's too much hot sauce. Just the fact that they gave him a really shit burrito. Everyone's just fucking with him because he's blind. Mean-spirited movie is what it is.
I'll give you that. I don't. I'll give you that with what you said then about the Mexicans. That they must have good burritos because you've heard it many times. I think my old man used to do it. Well, this is a good Chinese place.
Oh,
why,
Dad?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because all the Chinese are eating here.
No, right, that's not right. We still do that to this day because, right, especially with Chinese restaurants, I'm not sure if it's the same everywhere, but there are two different styles of Chinese restaurant you get in the UK. There's the one that's been built around MSG, and it's been built largely to like British taste, and it's very much a Chinese takeaway. Whereas other ones you go in, it's a Chinese restaurant, and if it's a great sign. Because there's a lot of Chinese students in Edinburgh, and up on Northbridge, there's loads of Chinese restaurants, and we've been in there, and honestly, I've walked in and I've said the exact same thing. I'm like, oh, Bethan, look, it's full of Chinese people. This is going to be great, and it usually fucking is. So I don't give a fuck. That's not racist. That is stating the facts.
We got a place on the end of Wellfield Road. It's probably, I don't think you've seen it because you haven't been here for a while. Little Vietnam. And we went in there after the rugby a couple of weeks ago.
Named after the guy from the start of this movie, funny enough.
It's gotta be, yeah. The little Vietnamese dude. I walked in, and it was the same thing. We were the only. I say, yeah.
Yeah, that's the best sign. Like if I walk into an Asian restaurant and I'm the only cracker in there, I'm over the fucking moon. I'm like, I've chosen wisely. If I go to a Chinese restaurant and it's full of, it's like when, like if you didn't know any better, you're like, I want to go for Japanese food. I don't know any of these restaurants. And you walk into Wagamama and everyone's white. You're like, fuck, I have 100% booked the wrong place.
I love how you said cracker. I was just going to say the only ivory people, but you went straight to cracker.
It's okay. I can be an Uncle Tom. It's absolutely fine. That doesn't count. Alt titles for this. I hope there is some.
Hang on,
alternate
sorry.
Sorry.
We went off on a random. I had a third hate.
Oh yeah, shit. Sorry, mate. Is it the drugs? Is it the blue drugs?
It's drug. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yes. It has to be drug. Yeah, 100%. Now we can move on to alternative titles. This is one of the more interesting alternative titles because never before have I hoped for a better title than I have with this movie. Because as we've already mentioned, Blind Fury is not a good title for this film. The blind bit's okay. He's blind as fuck, but the Fury bit doesn't work.
Well, I was going to say settle in then because you're not going to get one. But if you like the blind bit, you'll be all right.
Yeah, I would have thought so. Yeah.
Blind Rage from Bulgaria.
Same problem.
France, Blind Revenge.
It's not really revenge. No, it doesn't work.
None of these are going to work, dude. Greece, Blind Samurai. Again, he's not a samurai. Fine. He's not a samurai.
He's not a samurai, but I still think Blind Samurai works better than Blind Fury.
Hungary, Blind Destiny. Different film.
Completely different film. Absolutely different film.
Norway, Blind Desperado.
I just want it to be called Blind Swordsman. That's what I want it to be called. Yeah,
you're not going to get it.
No.
Romania, Blind Anger.
No, come on, Romania. It's the same problem. You're running into the same problem.
That's it, really. Then there was an alternate. Oh, there was a working title from the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Saga, Tales from the Warrior Age.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Good thing. That sounds like a budget video game. Fucking hell, That's terrible. All right, well, that was disappointing. Let's move on to facts.
So, Rutger Hauer said of this movie on his official website, Blind Fury was one of the most difficult jobs for me because of the combination with the swordplay. I'm glad it does not show. I mean, that was so difficult. I trained for a month with a blind man who taught me his handicap. He was such a nice man. First thing he said was, I don't get confused about what I see. Then I trained every morning at 4:30 before shooting for those 7 weeks. Then Sho Kosugi was brought in for the swordplay. That was an additional shoot for a week or so. Wonderful. So we enjoyed it.
Well, yeah, and I think it actually showed on screen. I know there are a few moments, and you get this with, you got to remember these were all filmed back in the 80s, lower def, stuff like that. There are a few moments where you're like, oh, that's clearly a stunt guy. A lot of these films have been shown up now in like super high def where, you know, even stuff as James Cameron, like when we did True Lies, there are a few sequences where suddenly on the horse, you're like, well, that clearly isn't Arnold Schwarzenegger. You didn't notice so much when you were younger because you're watching it on standard def. Suddenly you're watching it on like Blu-ray, 4K, all these things. Every time you see someone's barnet is slightly different, you're like, okay, that is a fucking stunt guy. But for the most part, it is Rutger Hauer. And as we already mentioned, he does it without the glasses. And he's always, at no point was I ever taken out the film by I was like, oh, I think he can see. Bizarrely, the only time was taken out of the film was because of a photo. They're like, Billy picks up an old photo of Frank and Nick in Vietnam. Yeah. And he says, based on that photo, he goes, oh, you used to be able to see. In that photo, he looks blind as fuck. He's looking off into Frank's looking right down the fucking lens of the camera. Nick is looking off to Timbuktu. And he's like, oh, you used to be able to see. I was like, dude, a motherfucker has never looked more blind than in that photo. Unbelievable.
After principal photography was completed, a sequel to this movie was planned but never materialized due to the movie's performance at the box office.
Yes, fair enough.
Yeah. The chase scene and the
shame actually, because I think like the
I think you gave it another one or two. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. The important thing they got right is Rutger Hauer, and he gives a great and compelling lead performance. And you're like, do I want to, for all the issues of this film, do I want to see, a 1992 film with Rutger Hauer playing Nick again? I'm like 100% yes. So bit of a shame.
The chase scene under the Reno, Nevada arch, where two cars collide at an intersection, was unplanned, but it was decided to retain it in the movie. So basically, they just filmed two cars crashing. Awesome. And they're like, we're going to keep that in the movie. Are those guys okay? Yeah. Okay, good. We're going to keep this in the movie.
Yeah. As long as they survived, waste not, want not, 100%.
Brandon Cole, who was Billy, received an introducing credit, even though he had worked on such earlier theatrical movies as Jagged Edge and The Black Cauldron. He was the kid in the voice of the Black Cauldron.
I've never seen the Black Cauldron, so I will believe you. No,
there you go. You said it enough. I'm not going to say that he was based on Zatoichi. The characters Lyle Pike and Tector Pike were named after three characters from the Wild Bunch: Lyle and Tector Gorge and Pike Bishop.
Yeah, it has that vibe to it as well. I get it.
Shokasugi received a special appearance credit. Special appearance by Shokasugi. Who?
Yeah, I think
Ninja.
again, nowadays you just have and Sho Kosugi, wouldn't you? Like, or
Yeah.
with Sho Kosugi, he'd be one of those. Like, you go through the cast and it'd just be and or with or whatever they do nowadays.
Yeah, Shokasugi's never known by a personal individual name. He's just billed as the assassin.
Yeah, he's just the Japanese dude. In case you didn't know he was Japanese, Frank can tell that by rubbing his face for a split second and just going, "Oh, Japanese." Like, is that a skill somebody has? Like, is that like one of those like obscure world records where it's like somebody like with a blindfold just goes down and just rubs people's faces and goes Japanese, Polish, Irish? Like, I don't know if that's a skill. Is that would that be considered racist nowadays if you just went up and rubbed someone's face and went Chinese? I think it might be.
Dude.
Sorry.
The nickname of Nick Parker given to him by Billy was Uncle Nick. Really, that's a fucking fact.
Sorry, so I've just got this in my head now of just like of Nick going into a Chinese restaurant and just walking around and just rubbing everyone's faces, go, "Oh, it's okay, everyone. This place is going to be awesome. They're all Chinese."
You know,
Well, you wouldn't know if he walks in. He would have to do the face rub thing, if he was on his own.
face rub thing. Right,
Sorry,
moving on.
sorry. Yeah,
really
quickly.
Yeah, that's we're done with facts.
Okay. Video games. Unsurprisingly, there wasn't a Blind Fury video game. There is only one answer for this, and it's on Game Pass. I think it was actually added to Games with Gold. So if you have an Xbox and you have any of the subscriptions, it's free to download. It's a game called The Veil of the Shadow Crown by Falling Squirrel, and I played it a few months ago. It is unfucking believable because you are playing a blind swordsman, a blind swords lady, a lady who learns to become a warrior and all that jazz, and you don't see shit. They don't even bring up colors on screen to represent sounds. Literally, the screen is black, and you put your headphones on and you fight in this game. You shoot a bow and arrow, and it's all done by sound. And it is unfucking like, because on the screen you see like dots and stuff. It's not representing anything. It's just representing being fucking blind. And when I was playing it, I actually found myself, I was closing my eyes because you are just all in on the sound. Again, one of the things this movie actually did low-key really well was represent how he's dealing with situations, the way they shot it, some of the cinematography, like the close-up on their ear and stuff. It doesn't overdo it, but you always understand how conceptually he's getting on with these situations, how he's fighting, how blah, blah, blah. This game does it amazingly to the point where you play the entire game completely blind, and it's all based on sound. And you could absolutely do this movie with the same concept, just obviously it would be a bit more fun, a bit more goofy, but all the combat, everything, and even you go to like a town and you go and see certain vendors, and it's all based on sounds and descriptions.
What was the name of the game?
It's called The Veil of the Shadow Crown. And it's honestly, it's even if you play it, because it's not a long game, but even if
Can
you
it be classed as a video game if you can't see anything though? I don't.
100%. 100% it's a video game. Like, there's nothing on screen, but it's all because you're sitting there with a controller and you are controlling it.
That's
like
an audio book.
Yeah,
that's an interactive audio book.
But you're controlling it.
Video game.
But that's the thing. It makes you think about what, like, I guess a video game is. You just associate. Like, when I heard about it, I was like, well, sure. Because I know there's been like video games where you're playing someone who's blind in the past. But what it does is like it does visual cues on screen to represent sound, kind of like what they did with Deadpool. Sorry, not Deadpool. Daredevil. Like where they do the blind scenes and you see Jennifer Garner in the rain, and they're basically giving you a visual representation of what it's like for him to hear and build up a picture in his head.
Yeah.
This doesn't do any of it. It just makes you blind, and it's all just based off sound, but you control it exactly the same almost as if you were playing like Skyrim. But it's amazing how intuitive it is. And like like I said, if you could do a whole game based on this movie with the same system, I just implore anyone who has the chance, whether it be, via Xbox or whether you download it, it'd only be a few quid. It's a totally unique video game that isn't just one of these like, oh, that's an interesting concept. It kind of works. It just works as a video game. It's unbelievable. It's so smartly implemented that you're like, I can't believe nobody's done this before. But yeah, that's who I would have to make a Blind Fury video game.
I mean, fair play. Your passion for that sounds great. I kind of understand why nobody's implemented that before. It just doesn't feel like a video game to me.
That's the thing. It didn't.
Yeah.
It did. I wouldn't have purchased it, put that way, because I'd be like, that sounds like too much. It sounds like a high concept thing, which you play for 20 minutes and just get bored of it. But because it was free as part of the subscription, I downloaded it. I was almost immediately amazed by how well it worked. To the fact, like I said, you're shooting bows and arrows. It doesn't feel conceited. When you're in battle, it actually feels like you're in a fight. And like I said, I'm sitting there in the fucking living room with my eyes closed playing this video game, and it just works.
So I went down the Swordmaster route instead.
Mhm.
I was looking at things like the Ghost of Tsushima.
Tsushima, yeah.
Tsushima?
Tsushima. That is based on the island in Japan.
Again, not confused with sushi, I'm sure. But yeah. So the Ghost of that anyway. Or like you had like the Last Ronin, or
the new one from Ninja Theory. Not Ninja. Is it Ninja Theory? Yeah, I think it is Ninja Theory.
But there was the Ronin games as well. Oh no, Tenchu.
Tenchu, I used to love that back in the day.
Yeah, but I actually, and it's ironic because it shares it shares a name with Blind Fury. Blind Fate Ido no Yami.
Blind Fate Ido no Yami.
Yeah, it's like a role playing game set in like futuristic Japan, where you're fighting robots and things like that. But I don't know whether I said to myself, "Oh, this will work because it's called Blind Fate," which maybe would be a better name for Blind Fury. But
it would have been. It absolutely would have been.
The gameplay style and everything like that just felt like it would work for me. I mean, yours is very interesting. I'm just not. I can't get my head around that. That's not a video game. So.
No, as I said, it is one of those things I think you need to experience to really get your head around, and just how well it works. Yeah. But yeah, I know what you mean. And as I said, like most video games, when they've done, like for the life of me, I can't remember what it was called, but I've played video games in the past where you move through a 3D space and you are blind, but as I said, kind of sound fills in elements of the scenery for you. So it's like sound bounced off things, so you get an idea of where things are. Whereas this is just completely reliant upon sound. And as I said, it bizarrely works. So that's what I'll go for. In terms of scores and recommendations, I feel like we might be in the same ballpark here. For me,
we do scores, we've missed one, haven't we?
Have we? What have we missed?
Hug to the Future.
Oh shit! Of course. This is an interesting one because I would have loved a sequel back in like I said, 1992 would have been ideal. I'd be more than willing to have a remake for this film. I'm not emboldened to it. I actually think, as I mentioned earlier, they were on the right path in terms of not making it too close to the source material. I like the idea of doing a truly American take. Zatoichi is an inherently interesting character. So whether it be a sequel to this, whether it be another reimagining, I just like the idea of it being up on screen again. So the whole concept of the blind swordsman is just inherently fucking cool. Yeah. And I think this film did a lot of things right, but certainly did enough things wrong where you're like, as you mentioned earlier, it has all like the constituent parts to be a really good film. It just doesn't quite come together. So there's a good film in here. So whether it be a remake, a sequel, whatever, I'd be on board for any of those.
For me, pretty much the same. I would have wanted to see sequels of this in the past. So if we think about Hug to the Future, I'd like to incorporate sequels into a remake. So the best way I would like to see this is a TV show.
Yeah, it makes it. Well, it was a TV show for like 4 years in Japan.
Was it what? Zatoichi?
Zatoichi, yeah, there was 26 films and it ran as a TV show for 4 seasons with like fucking 80 something episodes. So there's tons of Zatoichi in Japan.
But I'd like to see Blind Fury as going
well, it
around.
Makes sense. I mean, it's that kind of vibe.
It's perfect for those type of TV shows you had in the 80s. I can't remember the Bounty Hunter one where the guy was named Reno in it.
Yeah.
Can never remember that one. 18 where they're going around. You had Kung Fu. Same thing.
It has that vibe at the end of the film. Where, I mean, let's be clear, this isn't much longer than a fucking, a TV episode in 2024. Where he comes in, he changes everyone's lives, everyone wants him to stay, but then the fucking episode ends up with him like the Incredible Hulk at the end of him just walking off into the distance, into a new town, onto another adventure. 100%.
It is basically a 2-episode pilot.
Yeah, it really is. No, I think you've nailed hit the nail on the head there. I think the ideal setup for this would be like a 10 episodes, Netflix special where he just goes around the United States, basically gets into scrapes, changes people's lives, and then just moves on to something truly episodic, kind of like what they were going to do or they hinted at with the Mandalorian. At the start, it was almost like a monster of the week thing. Like, oh, he gets into scrapes and then he goes to another part of the universe. He's a gun for hire. They did like a Seven Samurai episode, but then all of a sudden they got in love with the narrative and it became about that. That's what this should be. It's just him going about getting into scrapes. Of course, there'd be a Seven Samurai episode. There would, or the Magnificent Seven would, choose your poison.
Yeah.
And just have him go from town to town, basically. Yeah, I think that's the right answer.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you on that one. And what I would do it like Jack Reacher style at the end, where he finally gets his pie. Let Nick finally get a proper burrito at the end of it, like a proper burrito.
That'll be the underlying like ongoing theme. It's like you have all these separate stories, but the one thing is him just trying to find a half decent fucking burrito.
It really upset me.
And so it should. I always say there are certain, there are a lot of places. If you go for Italian, as great as Italian food is, I've had bad Italian foods. I've had bad French food, despite the fact that good French food is some of the best food you'll find in the world. When it comes to I always think Indian food and Mexican food, there should always be there's a bar where it's always at least decent. And to this day, I had this one Indian meal, like a takeaway, and it was just fucking dog shit. And I'm I think that's the only ever genuinely terrible Indian meal I've had in my life. And it's the same with burritos. There's just this kind of base. I'm oh, well, burritos are going to be at least decent. There are fantastic burritos, but I expect the kind of baseline to be okay. And then you see that fucking sad little burrito in this film. So yeah, make it as much about burritos as anything else. And if you can incorporate it into the title, all the better. Scores and recommendations. Yeah. So for me, cut straight to the chase, it's a 3 and it's a no. I couldn't recommend this to anyone. It kind of feels like a movie of its time. It's got too many problems. I'm more than willing to overlook them because this film's so fun. I enjoyed it, but I'm not recommending it.
Nail on the head there, dude.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 3 and it's not one that you can recommend. We've said this in the past. It's one I'd recommend to you.
Yep.
And things like that, but it's not one I'd recommend to just any random person on the street.
Even in my own house, I watched this on my own. And Beth was like, oh, did you watch Blind Fury without me? I'm like, it's okay. You would not have enjoyed Blind Fury.
No,
she might have enjoyed moments, but she'll get over it pretty quickly. In terms of next week, so we are going to do a very brief quiz to see if you can guess what we're doing next week. So the year, sir, is unsurprisingly 1989. It's always 1989. So you've got a lot to deal with, but surely we're running out of movies from 1989. It feels like 50% of the fucking movies we've covered on this podcast were from 1989. So
I mean, I do see a flaw in this quiz, even though I came up with it, because we're never going to get it from the year. So in that case, because we've already said it, I'm going to go Collision Course.
No, it's not Collision Course. The actor, Ed Harris.
Ooh, Ed Harris, 1989.
That's a pretty big hint.
Yeah, it is.
If he's the, and I'm saying he's the lead.
The Abyss.
The Abyss, dude. You got it in 2. The Abyss.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, the third one, you would have got it on the third hint would have been James Cameron. I'm sure you would have got then. So yeah, The Abyss. Basically, my wife has never seen it, so I want her to see it. It's a film I've not seen for quite a few years, but it's
been a while, mate. It's been a while.
This is one of the reasons I'm pretty uneasy about water to this day. Certainly deep water. That bit when you've swim out into the sea, in places like Spain, and then all of a sudden you get the drop off, the cliff, and the cold air comes up from below. You're like, fuck this. I've seen The Abyss. I've seen how this ends. I mean, it's got an amazing cast, amazing production values. The effects, certainly last time I watched, totally holds up. And I think it's low-key one of the better James Cameron films, which is always tricky to say because I know we have different feelings, but James Cameron hasn't really missed before. So, I think this is going to be a really interesting one to go back to. I will say I'm going to watch the cinematic, the original cut, not the director's cut. So
okay.
I feel like if I'm going to go back and rewatch this, I'm going to go back and rewatch the one I grew up with as a kid, not the longer director's cut, which I have seen since, and we can talk about if we want to, but I'm going to go back and watch the theatrical cut.
I'll see whichever one appears on my TV.
Fair enough. I don't think it really matters. So that was Blind Fury. Next week, we are covering, 1989's The Abyss. Do you have anything else to add before we wrap this shit up?
No, mate. I'm actually, I'm good today. I'm good all days, but I'm good. I'm good.
Fantastic. Okay, I've been Liam. He has been Rob, and you have been listening to the Hey You Guys podcast. Thanks for listening, and see you next week. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Oh, and before I forget, where can folk reach us if they were so inclined to?
Well, you can actually reach us on Hey You Guys 80s at Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. But if you want to send us a mail, do heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Send us in your recommendations. Send us in your thoughts about any of the episodes. Just literally talk to us. We'll have a one-sided talk with you on the podcast.
Yeah. We're nice folk. Get in touch. But no, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Hey, you guys!